So yeah, it's been a while since I last made a video on this channel, hasn't it? And by a while, I of course mean 3 years. I'd go on a spiel on what I've done in my absence, except I already did that in another video that'll come out later this year. In the meantime, I decided to make a super brief video, something I can get done pretty quickly before moving on to bigger projects. I can't think of a good way to segue into the next paragraph, so... Tetris, huh? It's a simple game, and yet there's a secret sauce that makes it so addicting that its popularity endures 40 years later. So of course it's the most oversaturated video game franchise ever. How many versions are on Switch again? Actually, there are so many different versions of Tetris by so many different developers that it kind of transcends franchise status in my mind. It's more like its own subgenre with various iterations of this core formula. And Tetris Worlds is one of them. But why am I looking at this version of Tetris over any other, you ask? What makes it specifically interesting enough to talk about? I will tell you when the time comes. First, we need to establish something. I'm playing the PS2 version because that's the one I have. With most next-gen games, that wouldn't matter because it's the same no matter where you play it. At most, it might run better on some platforms or have a little bit of exclusive content on each platform. But here, Tetris Worlds on PS2 and PC is straight up a separate version from the game released on GameCube and Xbox. Most of the differences are visual from what I could tell, but I also haven't played that specific version, so I don't know. Just remember that everything I say about this game is specifically about the PS2 version. For example, check out the disc this version was released on. It's blue. The PS2 even recognizes this and makes the disc icon blue to match. That's because it's actually a CD-ROM, which was an option for PS2 games with low enough file sizes. Of course, most games use DVD-ROMs, which weren't blue, not sure why. But enough talk about discs, let's get into the story. Yes, you heard that right. This game has a story. It's 2002 and games are putting more emphasis on storytelling than ever, so we gotta keep up. Making all these blocks fit together and clearing lines of them for its own sake isn't enough. We need a reason to do so. To be fair, having a basic story in a puzzle game was nothing new in 2002. Keyword is basic. They'll typically meant to be an explanation for why you're playing the puzzle game, nothing more. And they really take themselves seriously at all because it's a puzzle game and would feel out of place if they did. Here's how the story section of Tetris Worlds manual starts. The Tetrions! There are many theories as to the origin of the Tetrions. The simple truth is that they are the only evidence of long since forgotten space-faring species. Tetrions are gateways to planets over distant stars. They can only be opened by intelligent species because it only works with those who unlock the secrets of the following laws. There's more, but I think that's more than enough to realize that Tetrions is what this game calls Terminals, and that Tetris is a method of opening interplanetary portals. Enter the Minos, these robotic cubes which inhabit the planet Hadar 4, named after the star. Hadar, which has grown unstable and will soon explode, rendering Hadar 4 uninhabitable for the Minos. You play as a Tetrinaut, who is tasked with going to one of the 6 planets chosen to be a new home, and opening a portal for the Minos back in Hadar 4 by playing Tetris, and that's about it. That's the thing with this story. They put in all this shit about Tetris being the key to interplanetary travel, with a mysterious past tied to an equally mysterious race of space travelers, only for the actual plot to be nothing more than an excuse to play Tetris. I mean, I doubt anyone is asking for MGS2 level storytelling in a Tetris game, which begs the question of why they put in this much backstory to begin with. Also, there's a fundamental issue I have with the whole saving the Minos thing. I don't want to save them because they're really ugly and before the whole series died off. Just these cubes with an IO2 stapled on and the eyes are really realistic with eyelids, it's a really unappealing design. Lastly, I want to bring in touch with how bad the writing in the instruction manual is at times. Yeah, I know that's a weird thing to bring up, but most of the story details are relegated to the manual like it's an NES game, so I think it's worth bringing up. The Tetrion section specifically has shit a middle school English teacher would write in whole at, like using Tetrions twice really close to each other. Just say there, it's less awkward. And then there's this mouthful of a line. They can only be opened by an intelligent species because it works only for those who unlock the secrets of it. It's fairly long-winded. Why do you even need the comment about intelligent species anyway? Just remove that and say it can only be opened by those who unlock the secrets of the following blocks. Come to think about it, it's weird how they alternate between saying tetrions and blocks, and whenever blocks is said, it's capitalized. At first I thought it was just done for this one line, but they also say heal. They now know that manipulating the blocks in a certain way will turn a tetrion into intercell. Wait, what do you mean a tetrion singular? That wording makes it seem like only the one tetromino becomes a portal, when it's shown in game that the whole playfield becomes... Wait. Oh fuck, all this time I assumed that by tetrions they meant the tetrominos, but only now do I realize that the tetrions are actually the playfields. That's why they said blocks sometimes. That's what they call the tetrominos. Fuck. Well, I at least give the manual one thing. I like this part about the information mode, which has, among other things, a passage about the real-life history of Tetris. As this section is written from Leah's perspective, I specify this version because the manual flip-flops between being written from their perspective and a third-person one. It acts as though this is the fictional origin made up by, and I quote, an organic species who believe they invented Tetris, which is a fun detail. But then they say that we take Tetris too seriously. You're using it as a means to evacuate your dying planet. What the fuck do you mean we take it too seriously? Now, full disclosure, that was the whole reason I wanted to review Tetris Wars to begin with. It's just weird to see a random Tetris game trying to have all this deep world, and I kinda wanted to talk about that. But now that I'm here, I might as well talk about the actual game. One issue though. It's Tetris. To go into the core gameplay of Tetris Worlds is to go into the gameplay of Tetris in general. And to go into the gameplay of Tetris in general is pointless because everybody already knows how it works. All that leaves is what this game brings to the table. Aside from the aforementioned story, is there anything of note? Well, yeah, actually. Tetris Worlds has two primary modes, story mode and arcade mode. Don't get too excited by the name story mode. There's no additional story beats in that mode. What I mentioned in the story section really is all there is. That said, it is still the main mode and thus the main focus from here on. The first thing to talk about is the Minos. While playing, a Tetrion will appear beside the Tetrion, and as you move the Tetromino, it moves accordingly, tying into the idea that they're the ones playing Tetris. Tetra. You can also customize it, changing the color pattern on it, giving it accessories, or even swapping it out for another one. Not sure what this does. I assume that each Mino just has its own rank that you want to level up. Oh yeah, that's another thing. As you play, your Tetrion's rank will go up. As I can tell, this just causes more Minos to access the portal and the environment around you to transform. Also, there's a separate rank for each mode, so I guess fully completing it means maxing out your rank for each mode with every Mino. But what exactly do I mean by modes? Well, I guess variance is a better choice of words since the game used mode for something else, but the point is, this game has 6 variations of Tetris. 3 already seen in earlier installments, and 3 made specifically for this game, and each one corresponds to a different planet. Here's a quick look at each mode and what I think about it, because what else am I supposed to do here? Tetris. I mean, the name of this mode said it for me. It's hard to fuck up Tetris, and I definitely wouldn't say this game did, but it doesn't bring anything major to the table either. There are a few things done differently, the biggest being how levels work. In most games, you level up once for every 10 lines you cleared, but in Tetris World, the amount of line clears, or points rather, on that later, you need to level up increases as the game goes on, being 5 times your current level. What else? Oh right, you can do this. I do this for as long as you need, in fact. I only use it to try and move closer to Tetromino into a spot when needed, but you could use it to give yourself potentially infinite time to place it somewhere. A lot of critics at the time gave the game shit for this, feeling that it made the game too easy, which I guess is a trivialized one of the main sources of challenge for Tetris, which is that you don't have infinite time to place each piece, and the time you have decreases the longer your one lasts. That doesn't really matter as much when you can just rotate the piece and extend your time indefinitely. Presumably to discourage the player from abusing this mechanic, there's also a time limit, but when it hits 0 you go into overtime, you can just keep playing, no problem. I don't know what's different about overtime or why you try to clear the level beforehand, aside from a stat displayed by the end card, which, I mean, who who really gives a shit. Still, I wouldn't say this ruins Tetris, especially since you can just not do this if you really don't want to. But I at least get why some may feel that this feature cheapens Tetris. And I feel it's worth mentioning since it applies to all of these variations as a part of the core. Speaking of variations, Square Tetris is one of them. In this mode, you're trying to form a 4x4 square out of tetrominoes. Clearing lines with part of a common square makes them multiple line clears. Yeah, how many points you get for clearing each line isn't necessarily equivalent to how many lines you actually cleared in this game. The T-spin, for example, makes you 7 points when it clears 2 lines at most. There was a proper score if you're wondering and also haven't noticed by now. I guess these stats serve the same purpose instead. But as for the mode itself, I found it uninteresting. Also a little annoying to make these squares when the pieces you get are random, meaning it could take a long time before you get a piece you actually need. Cascade Tetris. This mode's a lot more interesting. The gimmick is that when you clear a line, any block stuck in midair will fall to the closest surface, potentially allowing for additional line clears, dubbed cascades by the game. I feel that this makes a much bigger difference in how Tetris works than Square Tetris, where the core gameplay is the exact same, but there's an additional mechanic stapled on. Here, the gimmick alters the core, though I will say that it makes the mode a bit easier. This is the only one I beat. Oh yeah, unlike most versions of Tetris, specifically the standard level-based system seen here, there's a definitive endpoint. Now if you're playing where the game becomes practically unplayable like NES Tetris, the game just ends when you beat level 15. Weird. So those were the returning modes. The next week we made 4 Tetris worlds, and they're all based off Cascade, featuring that most gravity mechanic. Like Sticky Tetris. The goal is to clear garbage blocks this time, but there's a little more to it than that. Sometimes such terminals are made of multiple segments. If one segment of a block is in midair, it will fall even if the rest of the block is on the surface, which makes cascades a lot easier. Blocks of the same color also merge into each other upon contact. Woo. Hotline Tetris. This one is weird. You have to clear lines on these lines to get points. That's a really confusing way to say it, I know, but you get what I mean. The higher the line, the more points you get. And yes, it specifically has to be on the lines. Line clears anywhere else give you nothing in this mode. It's more annoying than anything. Lastly, there's Fusion Tetris. Here you have to connect single block tetrominoes to a fusion block, making them wed. Collect how many the game demands to win. And that's about it. Yeah, I have increasingly less to say about these modes as we go on. Also, the fusion block is buried under a bunch of garbage blocks, so it's kind of annoying to get to it. Or maybe I just suck. That leaves us with 2 variations of Tetris that I actually enjoy. The other 4 weren't terrible, but I can't say I have any interest in playing them again. But what else is there to talk about? Well, there's a presentation, which is fine. I've already expressed my disdain for the Minos themselves, but it's cool that whatever power you give your Mino is also given to the tetromino. Not a fan of their ground look though. The environments are also really primitive, but I suppose that's forgivable for like Tetris game, if I didn't have the highest budget. Then there's that arcade mode I mentioned earlier, where you can play whatever variation of Tetris you want for 5 minutes. It's mostly meant for multiplayer, but you can play by yourself, so let's check it out. Huh. Well, that was Tetris World. See you in a decade!